Saints Row! Where are you? It's been far too long since a new game graced my consoles. The Saints Row games is undoubtedly one of my favourite series, with particular emphasis on the first two games. Yeah, I'm setting my stall out early here. The first Saints Row was incredible. Saints Row 2 doubled down on everything and is arguably one of my favourite games of all time. Saints Row 3 was great, but it just didn't quite capture the magic of Saints Row 2, and Saints Row 4 was just Saints Row 4. But it's been 8 years since we've had a main entry to the series. Sure, we had a standalone DLC that took me to hell and went to hell, and a spin-off game that was just...
I don't know.
But like I said, for 8 years we haven't had an entry into the main series. I'm Roy McCoy, and this is what happened to Saints Row, a series that well and truly should be with me, and yes, I know we've got a new game on the way, but it's been far too long since we've had one. And while Rockstar seemingly keep embracing realism and make games like Red Dead Redemption 2 that was more like a documentary game, there is definitely a space for you, my friend. It is time for us to go back to Stillwater. You brought the fun, the havoc and the carnage into my life. And sure, you tried to be different. You embraced the absurdity while Rockstar embraced realism. But I know you were on that quest to be different. There is most definitely space in the market for a game like Saints Row 2 to come back. So let's talk about what happened to Saints Row. First of all, we need to talk about the curse of the clone. There are some games which not only define a genre, but seemingly end up creating their own subgenre. Metroidvania describes games that draw influences from the Metroid and Castlevania series, and Demon's Souls inadvertently created the Souls-like subgenre. Reviewers often use these terms to make comparisons and help gamers get a better idea of what game they're talking about. In most cases, the comparison or use of terms like Souls-like is not a negative. Saying that Hollow Knight is an amazing Metroidvania-style game does not take anything away from its brilliance. If I painted a painting and someone said, "That's amazing, it looks like a Picasso," I'd be grateful. I wouldn't burn it because someone said, "Oh, it looks like a great artist's work." Likewise, I wouldn't just delete my novel if someone said it reminded them of Tolkien or Hemingway. William Shakespeare is arguably the greatest playwright ever to have lived, and some of his works were heavily influenced by plays that came before. Most people just think that he did it better. The point is, art inspires art. However, there is one term in gaming often bandied around that seemingly has a more negative undertone. Grand Theft Auto clone. GTA seems to be the go-to reference point in any conversation about open-world action-adventure games with a crime or gang-related theme. And it's obvious why. Most of the GTA games are brilliant. When the series flipped into third-person perspective with GTA 3 in 2001, the next few entries went from strength to strength, leading up to what many argue is their finest hour to date, San Andreas in 2004. Rockstar had a huge influence on the popularity of the open-world sandbox genre. But saying that something is a clone of another thing has some really negative connotations. The result of cloning is the creation of an identical copy of something else, i.e. it does nothing new. A rip-off. And GTA clone is a term that leads to many fans and developers scrambling to defend their titles by saying that they do something different, something new. Ironically, when GTA 3 came out, there were some people who argued it was just a clone of the game Driver. Why didn't this claim stick? Well, Driver was a great game, but it focused more on vehicles as you couldn't really leave your car. And in short, GTA just felt more unrestricted, it felt free, and some people would argue that it just did things better. In the 8 years since the brilliant GTA 5 released in 2013, it seems to have dragged its existence across 3 generations of consoles with no end in sight of its popularity that would pave its way for GTA 6. While open-world action-adventure games are as popular as ever, titles like Horizon, God of War and Spider-Man all spring to mind, and highlight Sony's apparent strategy to make their first-party games all single-player story-driven adventures. And I do truly love those games. I was left thinking about how many of those so-called GTA clones have disappeared over the years, many of them suffering by being tagged as clones. Where are the true crime games? Sleeping Dogs 2, the new Getaway game. However, there is some good news on the horizon, with the knowledge that a new Saints Row is on the way, somewhere. And I can think of no better time than now to take a look at a series that some fans argue lost its identity along the way, ultimately ending up with a spin-off game in the form of Agents of Mayhem that didn't play out too well for the developer. Seriously, that could have gone better. Now, many among us are fearing that this iteration of the franchise may be the last roll of the die unless they get it right. So, Volition, if you're listening, please go back to what made the series great. Okay, now, on with the show. The history of Saints Row. Our story begins in the year 2004. Rockstar had just released their masterpiece that was San Andreas, setting a benchmark for open-world sandbox games. And along came a company called THQ who saw a gap in the market for a similar type of game. Now, before I crack on, I think it's best to explain the rather complex and convoluted family tree behind the Saints Row series, a story of paternity that would probably feel at home on Game of Thrones. The developer and creator of the Saints Row franchise was Volition, who had previously worked on the Red Faction series. Volition were a subsidiary of THQ, not to be confused with THQ Nordic, who come into the story later. This iteration of THQ was an American company who published games. The first 3 Saints Row games were made by Volition and published by THQ. At the end of 2012, with a new Saints Row game in the works, THQ went bankrupt and the rights to several series and Volition Studios were bought by Deep Silver in 2013. Interestingly, a company who currently hold the rights to Timesplitters and Dead Island. At that time, Deep Silver were a subsidiary of Koch Media, a name I pronounce with as much Qatar as I can muster, otherwise I sound like I'm saying cock. Which, may well be the official pronunciation, I don't know, but I'm not saying cock, because reasons. In 2014, Nordic Games purchased the rights to THQ and later in 2016 rebranded as THQ Nordic AB, who later rebranded again. Can we say re-rebranded? Yeah, let's go with that. They later re-rebranded as the Embracer Group in 2019. A company that purchased many old and extinct franchises and sometimes remasters them with dad joke style titles. Think Red Faction Remastered Edition. Ugh. Anyway, in 2018 THQ Nordic purchased Koch Media, who in turn owned Deep Silver, who owned the Saints Row rights and Volition, meaning that they found themselves back home, sort of. Well, now I do feel like Jerry Springer after resolving that family crisis. So, back to Bling Bling. No, don't panic, I haven't just become a well-spoken gangster rapper or forgotten I'm talking about Saints Row. Bling Bling was the original working title that became Saints Row. And it's times like this, I think, thank goodness for name changes. So, when Volition started out, the title was Bling Bling for the PlayStation 2 game, being made to answer THQ's call for something to fill that open world genre so populated by GTA. Of course, somewhere along the way, Bling Bling was rebranded as Saints Row and became an Xbox 360 exclusive, a change of platform which apparently created a laundry list of headaches for Volition. Now, I need to say that THQ didn't simply want to make a new GTA. They, of course, wanted to make their own thing, a unique and fun experience. And let's be honest, it was great, but sadly, reviewers made so many comparisons to GTA, and it got hit with that GTA clone tag. Now, come on, can't 2 games exist in the world that have a similar vibe? People can like more than one thing. I don't hear people saying, oh no, I've played Doom, I don't want to play another first-person shooter, or someone saying, oh, once you've played one Souls-like game, you've played them all. If you do say that, you're wrong. No, people keep coming back for more. Anyway, the first game hit North America on August the 29th, 2006, after a 2-year development cycle. It was set in the fictional city of Stillwater that was based on a bunch of places that I've never been. Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland and Baltimore. While comparisons were obvious with Grand Theft Auto, most critics mentioned the story, setting and gameplay, it very much did its own thing. There was extensive player customization, a huge garage of cars, GPS, a respect and activity system, and online multiplayer modes. However, for all Volition's good intentions of cutting their own little corner of that subgenre and doing something different, they couldn't quite escape those calling it a GTA clone, and sadly, that tag stuck. But THQ and Volition didn't fold there. When Saints Row 2 came in 2008, it decided to go full in on the GTA rivalry, even launching an ad campaign which said,
"Would you rather go bowling or steal a septic truck and spray loads of sewage on pedestrians?"
Is that even a choice? And if you have to think about that, basically this advert poked fun at the pseudo-real elements of their rival's game. And their cool advertising didn't stop there. You even had the porn star Tara Patrick
this game to a whole new level.
and the actor Gary Busey being used to promote the game. And let's be honest, Saints Row 2 did quite a good job of doubling down on the craziness, extreme weapons like dual-wielded samurai swords and a pimp slap, along with a well-written, hilarious story and full customizations. Eurogamer even said it was one of the most ridiculous and enjoyable games of the year. This time Stillwater is even bigger and is 1.5 times as big, and this was and still is my favourite entry into the series, followed by the first game. But thinking back, you could really sense there was a shift in direction for Saints Row at this point, that even while trying to taunt their rival, they had made their choice to change the DNA. The issue was that just before Saints Row 2, we got GTA 4, a game that I tried so hard to love and thoroughly enjoyed, but just didn't capture the magic of what came before. It went for a more kind of realistic vibe, gone with some of those crazy weapons and the carnage of San Andreas. And in my opinion, Saints Row 2 just did things better. Gameplay, the fun, arcade feel, the driving, those awesome weapons, the customization. It was a great game. So why didn't Saints Row 2 outperform GTA 4? Well, in my opinion, it's just down to the kudos that Rockstar had bought themselves with the great games that had come out before. I mean, we're talking about a time when Rockstar made games nearly every year. Remember that? I mean, we now live in a time where we haven't had a new GTA game for 8 years. And Rockstar only put out one new title in the entire life cycle of the PlayStation 4. I mean, sure, I appreciate all the work that went into making horse testicles realistic in Red Dead Redemption 2.
That not only are the testicles on the horses animated, because of course Rockstar has spared no expense in their quest to make ridiculous and grandiose, highly detailed open world games, they're dynamic. They react to the weather system, so if you take your horse up in the mountains and it gets chilly, they're gonna shrivel up.
But come on! A new Bully, Manhunt, even a new Rockstar table tennis game. Realistic horse testicles was not the fun I was looking for. Not the fun, Rockstar! Oof. It's no wonder that in this vacuum created by the lack of GTA 6, more and more people are starting to question what happened to series like Saints Row. Ironically, the last main entry of Saints Row also came out in 2013, the same year as GTA 5. And what have Volition done since then to capitalise on that void? Poorly received standalone epilogue set in hell, an even more poorly received spin-off that resulted in job losses, and a remaster of the third game, which was okay, but I think I'm not alone in wishing it had been a remake of the second. Anyway, after number 2, we got Saints Row the Third in 2011, and that was after 2 failed Saints Row games in Money Shot and Undercover. This time, to avoid the stigma of being labelled another GTA clone, THQ and Volition really invested in making the game more exaggerated, extreme, over the top, and any other adjective that basically means this game was going to be crazy. To give the game this time a more coherent tone, they based it on movies such as Bad Boys 2 and Hot Fuzz, 2 exaggerated action films. I mean, seriously, if you're basing an action game on a Michael Bay movie, you know it's going to be nothing sedate. They threw everything into this that they could. It felt like they'd asked an 8-year-old what they wanted to see in a game. Zombies, skydiving, tanks, and to go against that popular idiom, there is probably a kitchen sink in there somewhere. Interestingly, it's been long rumoured that GTA 4 had been looking at creating a zombie mode, and possibly looking at the Saints Row 3 zombies that came towards the end of the game, it put them off, or at least made them feel like they dodged a bullet. Saints Row the Third was well received, but for me, that desire to make it coherent by basing the tone on action films and throwing anything into it left it feeling decidedly incoherent, and I was left longing for the second game. That's not to say that I didn't love Saints Row the Third. I did. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I just didn't enjoy it as much as what came before. Even the new setting of New York-esque Steelport wasn't as good as Stillwater, but as much as I sound like I'm complaining, I enjoyed it, but it could not have prepared me for what came next. THQ announced an Enter the Dominatrix standalone expansion as an April Fool's joke in 2012. That was not a joke. It was confirmed as in development the next month. The most important thing to mention about this expansion was that it planned to add superpowers for the player character. But we didn't get a standalone DLC. Instead, in June, THQ said the announcement would be turned into a full sequel, and that it would come in 2013, which it did. And that gave the game potentially 2 years between the release of 3, and only a year after that DLC announcement. And in my opinion, boy did it feel rushed. Glitchy, over the top, and unfunny were just some features of the game that just missed a beat for me. Looking back, it did feel like a bloated standalone DLC, but the worst thing the game did was add superpowers. You became so OP, so overpowered, that the game lost any challenge at all. Driving became irrelevant, as why drive when you could fly? And on the whole, the game looked like it had an identity crisis. The fourth entry for me just made the third game look much better, and it's no surprise that THQ Nordic remastered the third game. In their typical remastering remit, it was the best of the easiest games to remaster, and after that, since 2013, we haven't had a main entry into the series. In those 8 years, with a lack of GTA, Volition had the opportunity to strike. A PS4 game, or a PS5 release title? Sure. 2015 gave us Gat Out of Hell that served as an epilogue to the fourth game and was, in my opinion, short, limited weapons, and it felt like it lacked creativity. After that, the spin-off, Agents of Mayhem, which was bad. A sorry end. I was going to compare it to the way Metal Gear Survive just used a Metal Gear name and not much else, but to be fair, Agents of Mayhem was slightly better than that. However, using characters like Gat to make a stronger link didn't do the game or Volition any favours. I mean, how did it come to the point where Volition thought it was the best choice to make a spin-off with loose ties, rather than a sequel to Saints Row? And here we are. Is Saints Row dead? No. We even know Volition have been working on a confirmed untitled 5th game since the release of Agents of Mayhem in 2017. But is Saints Row in trouble? Well, I'd say they need to be careful. Another bad entry could finish it off, but I trust Volition. They've adapted before and they've made some fantastic entries into the series. And about this 5th game, well, we know it was playable in 2019. YouTubers were invited to play it. However, due to NDAs, they can't talk much about it. But the fact that it's called the 5th game in the series truly makes me hope it's a reboot rather than a sequel. I would love to see a return to the format of the first and second game. That's my personal opinion. So, if it was playable in 2019, why aren't we playing it now? Well, games are facing many issues at the moment. The effect of lockdown and COVID from 2020 seems to be hitting games now. The knock-on effect of a troubled year seems to be one reason that many games are pushing back to 2022. Also, the drip feed of next-gen consoles. That means that some games are waiting till there are more people with access to the latest tech, because some gamers just want to wait till they play it on the latest technology. And it also seems that Volition want to get it right, possibly down to something I call the cyberpunk effect. But there is a fourth fact that affects Volition and Saints Row. They also face Grand Theft Auto. They don't want to release at the same time and get overshadowed. Even if the 5th Saints Row game is superb and better than GTA 6, a GTA 6 release would most likely damage sales. Rockstar have the history to release a game and it will sell. So, Volition need to get it right, but I'm sure they can. Let me know in the comments below what you would like to see in the new Saints Row game. Would you like it to be a return to styles like 1 or 2, or go even crazier than 3 and 4? Let me know what you want to see. Let's have a chat about it. But from me today, all I need to say is thank you very much for watching, and this is Roy McCoy, out!